200%. Not many AD ratios go that high, and they tend to be quite conditional. Thresh then is no exception. The passive of his E ability, known as Flay, begins with a total AD ratio of 80% at level 1, and scales all the way up to a 200% total AD ratio at level 5. Now, that's a mighty big number, very impressive, large, some would say massive. But what does it do? Thresh's E passive charges an attack over 10 seconds. This begins from a minimum value, we'll come back to that momentarily, and a maximum value, which is that min value plus that humongous AD ratio. So at max Flay at level 5, your next attack after 10 seconds will have charged up to 200% of your total AD in bonus magic damage on top of your regular 100% AD physical damage, as well as that minimum damage number we mentioned. That minimum damage, as mentioned before on previous Overexplains, is equal to your number of souls collected on your real passive times 1.5. So with 1 soul collected, that's 1.5 bonus magic damage on every single auto attack. With 100 souls collected, that's 150 bonus magic damage. So imagine you have 100 souls and somehow exactly 100 attack damage. That means that after 10 seconds you'll deal 150 magic damage plus 200 from the AD ratio for a total of 350 bonus magic damage on your next auto attack, on top of the 100 physical damage every normal champion would get. If you auto attacked again straight away though, that AD ratio would not have charged at all, and so you'll only do the 150 bonus magic damage with no magic damage coming from your AD. So how does attack speed factor in with this charge? Is it better to charge up by holding back your attacks, or should you keep wailing on enemies? In theory, attack speed reduces the power of your auto attacks by lowering the charge up time, and therefore attack speed is a bad idea. But is that really the case? I remember a lot of people talking about this way back in Season 3 when Thresh was released. Well, even with high AD, a max level E, and the lowest attack speed you can naturally get with that, the gap between your regular attacks will only charge up enough for 1 magic damage, and sometimes it fails even that. If you were to have higher attack speed, then there is no time to charge up at all. And true enough, you do lose out on charge up damage, but I'm not sure anyone is going to miss doing 1 damage. If you have souls, then the attack speed is actually very welcome, as you will always apply the minimum soul damage regardless of charge time. But if you choose to forego attack speed in favour of high AD, would charging up be better for damage per second? Even by just charging a quarter of the way, it isn't even close, with constant attacking providing much better DPS thanks to the regular attack damage and of course, any souls you've gathered. But that doesn't mean charging up during a fight is pointless. Natural gaps in attacks while you use your abilities like any combo off of your Q gives a few seconds to increase the damage. Plus, whereas Thresh loses a lot of mobility if he attacks while chasing or kiting, you have the additional option of choosing to move instead, allowing the attack to charge up and allowing improved mobility while losing less damage than another champion would doing the same. But how high can it go? Just by using the highest raw AD items currently available, it can deal up to 1511 damage on this naked target dummy, but can crit for 2081 thanks to our Infinity Edge. Bear in mind, this is with 0 souls and no added damage from runes. Technically with souls, you can scale this damage infinitely. Taking a different approach by using items with added damage and not just raw AD gets us a non-crit of 1611 and a crit of 2158. Doing a bit more damage, but these items are not exactly easy to get, with Thresh's ability to stack tier being rather horrible. If we add on an elixir, Thresh can crit for 2283, which is certainly an impressive number, but by just adding 40 armor and magic resistance, that crit goes down to 1758. Hardly enough to take down the champion in the late game, but enough for a bit of a scare. The highest damage from one item goes to Voltaic Cycler Sword, getting ahead of the almost tied Murmana and Bloodthirster, which both are ahead of Static Shiv. However, Static Shiv would do more damage over 3 attacks and provides wave clear, making it the most versatile of the options. So all this damage talk is great and novel, but if AD Thresh has so much firepower, why is no one playing it? True enough, even I'm not playing AD Thresh at the moment. It's always had its flaws, even at the peak of its itemization. The one standout flaw of Thresh is that he only has 450 attack range, which might sound great to any melee champion enjoyers, but it's absolutely tiny compared to any other ranged champions. Especially considering Thresh has no mobility to speak of. What are you gonna do, kite with Q? To make matters worse, Thresh has a uniquely bad wind-up stat. Now Cryo! What the actual hook is a wind-up? The wind-up is the first part of any auto attack. The first half that occurs before the attack has actually launched a projectile, or for those without them, before the attack has hit the opponent. It's a part that you can still cancel by moving or emoting or inputting any other command, which then resets your auto attack timer back down to 0. The part where Thresh and some other champs like Senna get weird is they're given an attack wind-up modifier. Most champions have an attack wind-up mod of 1, Senna has 0.6, and Thresh has 0.25. Using the general form formula provided on the official League wiki to calculate wind-up time, I'll spare speaking the details at you, but using Thresh's relevant statistics, these are the results. If we change only the wind-up modifier to a default of 1, or even mimic Senna's 0.6 and then try Thresh's 0.25 modifier, in this order you can see the wind-up time going up, meaning more of a delay before the attack comes out. This assumes 100% bonus attack speed because according to this formula, if you have no bonus attack speed, the wind-up mod doesn't make a difference. But Cryo, you've said a lot without explaining a thing. What does this mean? For Thresh, this means that having a terrible wind-up modifier will affect you at higher attack speeds. From just observing gameplay with high attack speed on Thresh, compared to other champions that don't have the modifier, there is a noticeable decrease in attack speed if you move between your attacks when playing Thresh. This is another reason why moving while charging an attack can be a bit better than attacking off cooldown while chasing or kiting, but honestly, the difference isn't that massive unless you have very high attack speed. A rule of thumb I've made up is that going above 1.5 attack speed is when it starts to feel noticeable to me. Senna has a lower attack speed ratio and a closer to standard modifier than Thresh, so when I try it with her I don't feel it nearly as much. Still, it's a point against lethal tempo and full on-hit Thresh builds, but all it really comes down to is that he can potentially be a little slower when moving between attacks. These attacks are naturally a bit more sluggish compared to other champions, but his auto attack is instant with no projectile. And if you want to maximize DPS when playing high attack speed, standing still will give you the highest DPS. So while yes, you should keep attacking to maximize DPS like any other champion would, it's not that allowing attacks to charge up has no benefits either. But no matter what, with range and wind up issues, is AD Thresh just bound to never work? At present making this video, circumstances are working massively against it. Sure, our current highest damage single attack item is Voltaic Cyclosword, but Cyclosword has absolutely nothing on AD Thresh's favourite item from past seasons, that being the almighty Stormrazor. Stormrazor had decent AD and stats and hit for 120 energized magic damage, rather than Voltaic's 100 physical damage. It was reasonably cheap, and you could also add rapid fire cannon for another 120, unlike what it does now. And eventually you could add static shiv when it was re-added to the game for another 60 to 170 magic damage, scaling with level. Certain others and mythic tier items like Prowler's Claw, which amplify damage taken on its active target, could be used for hilariously high damage numbers, and the mythic Duskblade added extra damage and a stealth on kill. The rune now missing from the game, Predator, was another way to not only add additional damage on your first hit, but also to get the movement speed to get close enough to actually hit with it, and was a great roaming tool from wherever you were building this monster. With the soul buffs of Season 11, all these items and runes, and the AP damage buffs of Season 13, AD Thresh was still not good enough to see any play, but was definitely a much funnier and scarier meme than he is now. That's not to say he'll never be viable. Non-negotiable damage like that is hard to call strictly bad, and even if it isn't going to be winning worlds, it could still find its home in your normal games and in the ranked games of insane people. But just because current itemization and runes don't support it, doesn't mean Riot won't randomly bring an item like Stormrazor back. I mean, we already got the modern static shiv, which is in some ways better, and hey, Freak could decide he'd like to see Jungle Thresh tomorrow. You never know. In normal play, Thresh's E-passive can be charged up for an occasional poke at the enemy laners. While playing support and not last hitting, that gives more time for this damage to ramp up. Given that the low-level ratios of this were nerfed a bit in patch 11.18, it's clear that his auto-poke can be quite a menace and isn't to be overlooked. If you are last hitting, it can affect minion health thresholds a bit as well. Sometimes you'll be able to last hit a minion you normally wouldn't have been able to if you charge up your attack a little, helped by any AD you've bought. But if it's scaling damage you want, since the AD playstyle is so flawed with its 10-second charge time in a meta where fights are decided in 5 seconds, then perhaps the soul Flay damage is what you want to prioritize. I've gone over some soul gathering tips in the previous Overexplain, so please check that out as well, but there are some ways you can leverage the auto-attacking on-hit effects of your souls decently. Since they count as an on-hit effect and do apply on every attack regardless of charge, this means that you can apply it a second time through a phantom hit of Ginsu's Rageblade, increasing your single target DPS quite significantly. And though it's meme at best in normal games, in Arena and Swift play it could be deadly when left unchecked. Speaking of Arena, the total AD ratio is at 300% and you get 3 souls per soul. So in that game mode, this E passive does get kinda crazy. Similar to Rageblade, you can apply it to multiple enemies at once with the passive of Rudan's Hurricane, applying your charge attack to the first target, with the bolts hitting for the soul damage. Magic penetration items like Terminus and Abyssal Mask can increase your on-hit magic damage as well. When trying to shred enemies with attacks, your abilities become useful for entrapping enemies close by to stop them from leaving your attack range, giving you the freedom to reach your maximum DPS by standing still. Of course, if moving and attacking is necessary, you should probably do that. And that's about it. As mentioned, please do check out my previous Overexplains, particularly the Soul one, as it's quite relevant to everything we've talked about. And wait, are you leaving? Well, if you're going to try to escape, could I convince you to go this way? That's right, Flay has an active. We're not even nearly done yet! You'd think that there isn't much to talk about with the Flay active unless you were a support Thresh player, which hopefully 99% of the Thresh players watching are. The Flay active is a short-range knockback that does fair AoE damage with a 70% AP ratio. Of course, as with any hard CC knockback, the uses for it are endless. What it's got going for it is its quick cast time and travel time, relatively wide area, and how easy it is to aim when it always centers around Thresh. A quick Flay is amazing at countering all sorts of dashes. Telegraphed engagers like Leona's E are easily parried off by flaying towards her, using the travel time to your advantage. Though with a faster dash like Alistar W or even Ornn E, you'll need to Flay even faster by placing the start point towards the opponent. That is to say, to Flay towards yourself, or Flay backwards. Flay travels towards the location you target with a short travel time, but it starts instantly behind Thresh, meaning you can choose where Flay will instantly hit by flaying backwards, placing the starter Flay under the enemy. This is fantastic not only for denying engages, but also for engaging. Any kind of high movement speed allows you to just kind of walk up and flay an enemy. Flashes and dashes also work quite well, if you can aim. Though in our previous video, we demonstrated using Flay in a combo to continue the CC chain starting with a hook and then into the box. And yes, Flay is brilliant for crashing enemies into box walls or other hazards, but Flay can also be a great combo starter by its own right. Flaying enemies towards you to entrap them in the box is certainly fine, and the 99% box slow can help land the hook afterwards as well. But it's pretty dodgeable by any flash or blink, and wasting your ultimate stings a bit. Since Flay knocks enemies in your chosen direction and slows them, this makes landing your hook much easier, largely because of the slow, but also by affecting your enemy's pathing. If you Flay them away from where they're running away to, they'll often resume going where they were going in a straight line, allowing for easy predictions with the hook where needed, particularly if they were holding their flash until after you flayed them. And most walking juke attempts are effectively nullified by the slow from your E. If you want to know more about predicting and aiming hooks, I have just the video for that as well. Speaking of combos, Thresh's Flay contributes a decent chunk of damage nowadays since the AP buffs. With a 70% ratio together with Thresh gaining ability power from souls, the damage is definitely respectable. Whenever you see the opportunity to flash into 5 enemies and land a Flay, it's hard to resist the temptation. That, together with the damage and disruption with a box follow-up, is a respectable initiation, though not really the best, so choose your moments wisely. An AP Thresh can employ Flay as a decent wave clear ability. It scales well enough to be a reliable AoE after one item, but given Thresh's lack of mobility, Flay is his only way of disengaging fights, and leaves him incredibly vulnerable when on cooldown, so once again, choose your moments carefully and position and space deliberately. Now, we've spent half the video talking about an AD ratio, then seemingly the next half revolves around an AP ability. Is there any way to have both? Yes. Though I promise a more in-depth look into this very topic in an upcoming video about Hybrid Thresh, there are some important points that link the passive and active of Flay together. Particularly worthy of note is that 200% total AD ratio results in magic damage, so any kind of magic penetration will scale both of Flay's halves. With that combo we outlined in the previous videos, you can always end it with an auto attack, so as far as Burst Thresh is concerned, AD and AP both contribute magic damage towards the combo. So long as you aren't leaning too hard into AD specific stats like critical strike chance, you're fine. Attack speed doesn't go to waste due to your Flay passive soul damage as we mentioned before, and so building Static Shiv, Storm Surge and Nash's Tooth actually totally makes sense as far as damage is concerned. Though that is an incredibly squishy build that's basically entirely reliant on hitting the hook, and you shouldn't do that. Replace Nash's with something tankier or something like Cosmic Drive if you want to just land hooks instead. But the details of such a build can wait till a future video that I hope you'll stick around for. Flay, at face value, is a rather weird name. The ability described by a word depicting such a violent and pain-inflicting act is often reduced to alleviating the suffering of teammates by peeling troublesome enemies off of them. It's a bit weird that such a powerful sounding attack is primarily used for its utility, but if you consider for a moment that the ability name is describing the passive element as well, then maybe the name makes a bit more sense. That being said, you don't need AD to give its name worth, as building ability power makes that high utility crowd control tool a deadly lash, yet the torture of the initial Flay hit is hardly even an echo of the delightful agony you've yet to inflict. Thanks for watching. I hope you'll check out the rest of the Overexplains as well, where I talk about the rest of Thresh's abilities and combos, and sound less sick hopefully. Soon enough, we'll reach not only the Hybrid Thresh build video, but also the final Thresh Overexplain, where I'll be talking about, in an abundance of depth, Thresh's ultimate ability, the box. I hope to see you there. Shoutouts to the members, War Squid, Ultimate Ground, Cryo's Dad, Gentleman Zeta, Lunar Eagle 1996, 53rd Alabama Booty Obi-Wan Kenobi, N Era, AC Immortal, Mr. Noodle, Bass1378, Gilbert Morals, Tierman Carantful, Luxxious, Dario Castro, Entity 9, Overseer, and Luca, Colorado Cosmico, Hollowed, Lunar Arc, King of the Crossroads The Vex Crew, Cposh, K-Rock, and Torjiro. Thank you so much for supporting the channel.